comes a moment in every man's life when motivation fails him. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a blade slowly losing its edge. He still wakes up, still shows up, but something inside him is loosened. Discipline feels heavy, focus feels distant, and the path he once walked with fire now feels like obligation. This is not weakness, this is the threshold. Ancient warriors knew this moment well. Samurai did not rely on emotion, inspiration, or confidence. They built something deeper, something unshakable. In feudal Japan, discipline was not a habit, it was a code, a way of standing in the world when fear whispered, when comfort tempted, when the ego demanded escape. Modern psychology now confirms what these warriors lived by. Discipline is not force, it is structure for the spirit. A system that keeps a man intact when chaos presses in. This story follows a young warrior at the moment his will begins to fracture. He trains, he struggles, he questions the path. And under the guidance of a silent mentor, he learns what discipline truly is. Not punishment, not rigidity, but presence under pressure. This is not a story about becoming more aggressive. It is about becoming immovable. Because true discipline is not loud strength, it is quiet mastery. And once awakened, it cannot be taken from you. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so I can keep bringing you great content. Chapter 1. When discipline begins to decay. The warrior had been on the path for a long time. Long enough that the beginning felt distant. Long enough that effort no longer felt heroic. Each morning still arrived on time. The wooden floor was still cold beneath his feet. The sword still waited where it always had. Yet something inside him had shifted. His movements were precise, but empty. His breath steady, but distracted. Discipline remained on the surface, but presence had thinned beneath it. This is how discipline truly begins to decay. Not through rebellion, not through quitting, but through quiet disconnection. In the early days, training had been fueled by fire. Purpose was loud. Identity was fresh. Every strike carried meaning. But now, repetition had dulled sensation. What once sharpened the spirit now felt routine. The warrior noticed small changes. First, delayed starts, shortened focus, irritation at minor interruptions. He told himself it was nothing. Fatigue, normal wear. But ancient systems never ignored small fractures. The mentor watched without speaking. He had seen this stage before. In the old schools, this moment was known as the silent test, the point where discipline outlives motivation. Modern psychology would call it decision fatigue. The nervous system, burdened by constant effort, begins to seek relief. Not dramatically, intelligently. It offers reasonable excuses. It whispers efficiency. It suggests rest disguised as wisdom. Fear does not arrive shouting. It arrives sounding practical. The warrior began negotiating with himself. I'll train later. I've earned rest. This repetition isn't necessary today. Each thought felt harmless. Together, they were erosion. The mentor understood what the warrior did not yet see. Discipline collapses when presence disappears. The body can continue long after the mind has left. This is the danger. When action continues without awareness, spirit withdraws quietly. In Stoic thought, this was the loss of alignment. In Zen, the loss of mind in action. In the samurai code, the loss of posture. The warrior's ego resisted this truth. Ego prefers extremes, intensity or escape. It despises neutrality. It would rather quit loudly than continue silently. So it began creating discomfort. Training felt heavier than before. Time stretched. Progress seemed invisible. And invisibility is where ego suffocates. The warrior did not yet think of quitting. But he had begun leaving himself. His attention drifted during forms. His mind replayed future outcomes, rank, recognition, results. Presence shrank as anticipation grew. Neuroscience confirms this pattern. When attention leaves the present, effort feels more painful. The brain interprets delayed reward as threat. Stress hormones rise. Fatigue intensifies. Ancient warriors knew this without words. They trained presence not for peace, but for survival. A distracted man dies first. One evening after practice, the warrior sat alone. The room was quiet, but his mind was loud. He felt frustration without a clear cause. He questioned the path without openly doubting it. This is the most dangerous stage, when discipline remains but meaning leaks away. The mentor finally moved, not with correction, not with instruction, only with presence. He sat across from the warrior, silent, No advice, no reassurance, just stillness. The warrior felt exposed. Without words, his inner noise became obvious. He shifted, adjusted, waited. Silence is merciless to avoidance. After a long moment, the mentor spoke only one sentence. Discipline does not fail when the body is tired. It fails when the mind leaves the moment. The warrior felt it land, not emotionally, structurally. Something aligned. He realized the truth. He had been training for outcomes, not presence. Discipline had become transactional. Effort in exchange for future relief. That is not discipline. That is bargaining. Ancient systems rejected bargaining. The path was not a deal. It was a posture, how one stood inside repetition, discomfort, and delay. The mentor did not offer motivation. He did not offer encouragement. He offered awareness. Stay, he said. Not longer, not harder, just here. The warrior understood then, this stage was not failure. It was initiation. Discipline was shedding its emotional support. What remained would be real or nothing at all. He bowed, not to the mentor, to the moment. And for the first time in many days, he trained without chasing tomorrow. The mentor did not raise his voice. He never needed to. The next morning, training began exactly the same hour, same silence, same repetition. But something had changed. The warrior was watching himself now, watching how the mind searched for reasons, watching how emotion tried to lead. After the final movement, the mentor finally spoke. "You are waiting to feel ready," he said calmly. "That is not discipline. That is permission-seeking." The words cut cleanly, not harsh, precise. The warrior had believed motivation was a sign of alignment. Energy meant correctness. Resistance meant something was wrong. But the samurai code had never been built on feeling. It was built on structure, on action taken regardless of inner weather. In the old schools, no one asked how they felt before training. Feeling was considered unstable. Loyalty was placed in form, time, posture, repetition. The system carried the man when the man could not carry himself. Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. Motivation fluctuates with dopamine, stress, sleep, expectation. Discipline that depends on motivation collapses under pressure. Samurai understood this intuitively. They trained discipline beneath emotion. Where mood could not interfere, the mentor continued. When you follow emotion, you train inconsistency. When you follow structure, you train freedom. The warrior listened. Something inside him resisted. Ego wanted to argue. It wanted meaning, excitement, reassurance that the effort mattered. But the mentor offered none of that. Instead, he described the code. Discipline was not intensity. It was loyalty to form. It was showing up without internal discussion. It was acting without needing belief. Bushido did not ask if the path was enjoyable. It asked only one question: are you present in what must be done? The warrior realized something unsettling. Much of his exhaustion came from negotiation. Every session began with internal debate. Every repetition was measured against expectation. This mental friction drained more energy than training itself. The mentor saw the realization settle. Emotion is a tool, he said, but discipline is a foundation. Stoic philosophy echoed this truth. The Stoics did not wait for courage to act. They acted in accordance with principle. Knowing emotion would follow or not, irrelevant either way. Freedom came from removing dependency on internal states. The samurai code went further. It demanded obedience to the path, even when the self resisted. This was not oppression, it was relief. For the first time, the warrior considered that discipline could be lighter, not heavier, that by removing choice, he could remove suffering. The code simplified life. No constant evaluation, no self-judgment, just action. That night, the mentor gave a single instruction: tomorrow, train without asking why. No goal, no affirmation, no promise. The next day, the warrior obeyed. At first, the mind rebelled. It searched for meaning, scanned for progress, demanded reassurance. But with no response, it slowly quieted. The body moved, breath settled, repetition unfolded. Something unexpected happened. Without motivation, effort felt cleaner. Without expectation, time passed differently.
Neuroscience explains this shift. When the brain stops anticipating reward, the stress response decreases. Attention returns to the present task. Energy stabilizes. Ancient warriors experienced this as calm endurance. By the end of training, the warrior felt steady, not exhilarated, not drained, neutral, grounded. The mentor nodded. This is discipline beneath emotion, he said.
This is the code. The warrior understood now. Motivation is a guest. Discipline is the house. One cannot depend on visitors to hold structure together. The samurai code was never about forcing the self. It was about aligning with a system older than mood, stronger than impulse. When the individual surrendered to form, discipline became sustainable. That evening, the warrior reflected.
He had spent years trying to feel disciplined. The code asked him to be disciplined. Feeling was optional. Presence was required. He saw clearly now why so many quit. Not because the path is too hard, but because they expect it to feel supportive. Ancient paths offer no comfort. They offer stability. And stability is stronger. The mentor offered no praise. None was needed.
The warrior bowed again, deeper this time, not in gratitude, in acceptance. He had stopped asking the path to carry his emotions. Now the path would carry him. Discipline had stabilized, but something else began to surface. It was not loud. It did not announce itself. It arrived quietly, in hesitation. The warrior noticed it during training. His body moved correctly. His routine remained intact, yet a subtle tension lingered beneath the movements. Breath shortened at moments where effort deepened. Focus slipped when repetition demanded patience. Nothing dramatic, only a quiet resistance that did not belong to fatigue. The mentor watched without interruption.
One evening, as the light faded and the training ground emptied, he finally spoke. "You have removed motivation," he said. "Now you will meet fear." The word unsettled the warrior. He did not feel afraid. There was no immediate threat, no danger, no opponent. But the mentor was precise. Fear did not always wear urgency. Sometimes it disguised itself as reason. Fear of stagnation.
Fear of wasting effort. Fear of becoming ordinary. Modern psychology names this anticipatory anxiety, the mind projecting discomfort into the future, then reacting as if it were present. The body responds the same way. Muscles tighten. Breath constricts. Attention narrows. Ancient warriors knew this without language. They trained not to eliminate fear, but to remain present inside it. The mentor continued. "Fear does not destroy discipline," he said. "Unseen fear does." The warrior began observing himself more closely. He noticed how fear whispered through logic. "Is this working? Is this enough? Shouldn't progress feel clearer by now?" These thoughts felt intelligent, responsible, but each one pulled him subtly away from the moment. Fear was not screaming for escape. It was suggesting optimization. The mentor explained that fear prefers comfort disguised as wisdom. It convinces the mind that delay is prudence, that retreat is strategy, that change is self-respect. But the result is the same. Discipline fractures not through rebellion, but through rational retreat. Neuroscience supports this ancient insight. The brain is wired to avoid uncertainty. When outcomes are unclear, fear activates problem-solving loops, not to advance, but to regain predictability. Discipline demands the opposite, remaining engaged without certainty. The samurai trained directly against this reflex. They stood inside discomfort without seeking resolution, not recklessly, deliberately. That night, training changed again. The mentor introduced longer holds, slower movements, extended stillness, no explanation. Just time spent inside sensation. The warrior felt the mind resist immediately. The urge to move, to finish, to do something surged. Fear was speaking. Instead of obeying it, the warrior stayed. Breath steadied. Muscles burned. Thoughts protested. But nothing actually happened. No collapse. No failure. The fear lost urgency when it was no longer negotiated with. This was the lesson. Fear feeds on reaction. Presence starves it. The mentor watched closely. He did not intervene when the warrior struggled. He knew this confrontation could not be taught, only endured. Over days, something shifted. Fear still appeared, but it no longer commanded. The warrior recognized its voice without following it. When doubt arose, he did not argue. He did not reassure himself. He simply continued. This neutrality weakened fear's grip. Ancient texts describe this as Fudo Shin, the immovable mind. Not fearless, unmoved. Modern science calls it emotional regulation, the ability to experience internal discomfort without behavioral disruption. Different language, same mastery.
The warrior realized a critical truth. Discipline is not sustained by confidence. It is sustained by tolerance for uncertainty. Fear demanded guarantees. The path offered none. And so the warrior learned to walk forward without answers. One evening, exhausted but clear, he asked the mentor a question. How do I know when fear is gone? The mentor smiled, slightly. When you stop asking, he said, fear does not vanish. It loses authority. It becomes background noise rather than command. The samurai code never promised peace, only steadiness. The warrior bowed, understanding settling deeper now. He no longer mistook fear for failure. He recognized it as proof of proximity to growth. Each time fear arose and he remained present, discipline hardened quietly.
Not through force, through familiarity. Fear could no longer surprise him. And when fear loses surprise, it loses power. Fear had been unmasked, but it was not defeated. When fear loses its urgency, something else rises to protect it. The ego. The mentor changed nothing outwardly. Training continued at the same hour. Movements remained the same. The path did not shift, but instructions stopped. No corrections, no approval, no explanation. Silence replaced guidance. At first, the warrior welcomed it. Discipline had strengthened. He believed he no longer needed direction. But within days, the absence of feedback became unsettling. Without the mentor's voice, the mind began speaking louder. Am I doing this correctly? Is this the best use of my time? Shouldn't mastery feel clearer by now? These were not excuses. They were arguments, sophisticated, reasonable, persuasive. The mentor knew this phase well. Silence does not calm the ego, it exposes it. When external structure disappears, the mind rushes to fill the void with justification. Ancient Zen teachings describe silence as a mirror. Whatever remains unresolved rises to the surface. Modern psychology agrees. Without external validation, the brain seeks narrative control to stabilize identity. The warrior began to notice how often he negotiated with himself before acting. He delayed small actions while rehearsing reasons. He replayed effort internally, seeking reassurance that it mattered. None of this reduced discipline outwardly, but inwardly, tension grew. One evening, unable to contain it, he approached the mentor. "You've stopped correcting me," he said. "How do I know I'm progressing?" The mentor did not answer immediately. He placed a bowl of water between them and let it settle. "When the water is still," he said, "you see clearly. When disturbed, you see only movement." The warrior waited. "Excuses," the mentor continued, "do not exist to avoid work. They exist to protect identity." This struck deeper than expected. The mentor explained that ego does not resist effort. It resists anonymity. It wants recognition, narrative, proof of advancement. Silence removes these rewards, and without reward, the ego demands explanation. That demand becomes noise.
The samurai code treated silence as discipline itself. Warriors trained without commentary so that action could exist without story. No praise, no self-critique, just presence. The mentor instructed the warrior to continue training exactly as before, but without any internal commentary. No mental tracking, no judgment, no justification, just action. At first, this was unbearable. The mind rebelled aggressively. Thoughts surged. This is pointless. This is inefficient. You should adjust something. Each thought carried urgency disguised as intelligence. But the mentor had warned him. Excuses survive in noise, he said earlier. They die in silence. So the warrior did nothing with the thoughts. He did not suppress them. He did not engage them.
He allowed them to pass without response. Neuroscience calls this non-reactivity, the practice of observing mental events without behavioral attachment. Over time, this weakens the brain's habit of impulsive meaning-making. The ancient system understood it simply. Silence starves the ego. Days passed, then weeks. Something unexpected happened. The excuses lost energy.
Not because they were disproven, but because they were ignored. Without attention, they could not sustain themselves. The warrior noticed his actions becoming simpler, cleaner, less dramatic. He trained. He rested. He repeated. No internal speeches. No self-congratulation. No self-criticism. Discipline became quiet. The mentor finally spoke again, but only once.
"You no longer ask permission to continue," he said. "That is progress." The warrior understood. Silence had removed the need to convince himself. Presence replaced explanation. He no longer required reasons to stay on the path. He stayed because staying was the path. This was the death of excuses, not through force, but through irrelevance. The ego still appeared, but its voice had softened. It no longer demanded outcomes. It no longer negotiated effort. Without narrative, it had nothing to defend. Ancient warriors called this state Mushin He'ef, no mind, not empty, unobstructed. Modern psychology describes it as flow without attachment. Different words, same truth. Discipline does not strengthen by arguing with weakness. It strengthens by refusing to explain itself.
The warrior bowed deeply that evening, not to the mentor, but to the silence that had refined him. He no longer needed to know where the path would lead. He only needed to remain on it. There was no moment of announcement, no internal victory, no sudden surge of confidence. Discipline did not arrive loudly. It settled. The warrior noticed the change not in intensity, but in effortlessness.
He rose before dawn without resistance. Training began without internal negotiation. Rest came without guilt. The struggle to stay disciplined had quietly disappeared. What remained was steadiness. The mentor observed from a distance. This phase did not require instruction. When discipline becomes identity, interference weakens it. In the beginning, discipline had been something the warrior did.
It required force, reminders, willpower. Each action felt like a decision. Each day demanded recommitment. But now action flowed without debate. Modern psychology explains this shift clearly. Behaviors tied to identity consume less mental energy than behaviors driven by motivation. When a man believes I am disciplined rather than I must be disciplined, resistance collapses.
The ancient system reached the same conclusion centuries earlier. Samurai did not wake and ask whether they felt prepared to train. Their code was not an activity, it was a posture. Training expressed who they were, not what they wanted. The warrior felt this truth settle into his body. He trained on difficult days exactly as he trained on calm ones, not because he forced himself, but because deviation felt unnatural. Discipline had moved beneath emotion. Fear still appeared, but it no longer disrupted behavior. Doubt surfaced, but it did not interrupt motion. Thoughts came and went, yet action remained consistent. This was not numbness. It was integration. The mentor finally spoke during a quiet walk through the forest. Effort ends, he said, when discipline stops asking for permission. The warrior understood. Earlier, discipline had relied on mood. Later, it relied on structure. Now, it relied on identity. There was no pride in this realization. Pride would have pulled him back into performance. This discipline did not need to be seen, it only needed to persist. Others noticed the change before he did. His presence felt heavier, though his voice was softer. He reacted less. He listened more. When pressure entered a space, he did not rush to control it. He allowed it to settle. This was not dominance through force, it was authority through consistency. Ancient warriors understood this kind of strength well. A man who does not fluctuate unsettles chaos. Emotional volatility feeds disorder. Steadiness drains it. Neuroscience supports this. Regulated nervous systems influence unregulated ones. Calm is contagious when it is embodied. The warrior no longer measured progress. Measurement had once been fuel, but now it was unnecessary. Tracking effort would have reintroduced ego. Discipline as identity does not require validation. He trained, he ate, he slept, he observed. Each action clean, uncomplicated. The mentor explained one final distinction. Discipline as effort breaks, he said. Discipline as identity endures. Effort depends on energy. Identity does not. Energy fluctuates. Identity remains. The warrior realized why so many men lose discipline after initial success. They treat discipline as a phase, a tool to reach something else. When the goal shifts or arrives, discipline dissolves. But the samurai code never promised results. It promised alignment. The warrior now understood that discipline was not a means to an end. It was the end itself, a way of standing in the world. Fear no longer dictated his movement. Ego no longer demanded proof. Silence had done its work. He was not trying to be disciplined, he was disciplined. And because of that, nothing external could easily take it from him. The mentor stopped walking and turned slightly. "You no longer need me," he said quietly. "That is how I know this has taken root." The warrior bowed, not in gratitude, but in acknowledgement. Discipline had crossed a threshold. What remained was the path itself. The mentor did not announce his departure. One morning, he was simply no longer there. The training space was unchanged. The path through the trees remained clear. The hours of practice still waited, indifferent and exact. Nothing had been taken away, except guidance. Once, this absence would have unsettled the warrior. He would have searched for direction, questioned timing, wondered if something was missing. Now, nothing wavered. He trained as he always had, not harder, not softer, simply present. This was the final lesson. The samurai code was never meant to produce dependence on a teacher, a system, or a destination. It existed to forge a posture toward life, one that remains stable even when structure falls away. The warrior understood now. Discipline that collapses without oversight was never discipline. It was obedience. True discipline continues when no one is watching. He walked the familiar path alone, noticing details he had once overlooked. The rhythm of breath against movement, the sound of wind moving through leaves, the quiet certainty of steps taken without urgency. There was no hunger for results. That hunger had once driven him forward, but it had also created restlessness.
Results had turned discipline into a transaction. If I give effort, I should receive progress. The ancient system rejected this logic. The path was not an exchange, it was a commitment. Modern psychology confirms this transformation. When behavior is driven by outcome, motivation fluctuates with feedback. When behavior is driven by values and identity, it stabilizes regardless of reward.
The warrior had crossed that line. He no longer asked where this was leading. The need for an end had dissolved. The path itself had become sufficient. Fear still visited, but it arrived without authority. It was no longer a signal to change course, only a sensation passing through awareness. Ego still whispered comparisons and futures, but those voices lacked weight. They were no longer consulted. The warrior realized something subtle and profound. Discipline had not narrowed his life. It had simplified it. Without constant internal negotiation, energy returned, attention sharpened, presence deepened. He was no longer chasing calm. Calm emerged naturally. This was not withdrawal from the world. He engaged fully, but without clinging. Challenges came and went, pressure arrived and passed. He remained. Ancient warriors described this as walking without leaving the ground, fully engaged, yet unentangled. Stoic philosophy echoed the same truth. Control what belongs to you, your actions, your posture, your attention, and release the rest. The mentor's final teaching surfaced clearly now, though it had never been spoken outright. The path does not promise relief. It promises refinement. The warrior did not feel complete. Completion implies an ending. Instead, he felt aligned, a state that does not conclude. Each day was the same and never the same. Train, observe, rest, repeat. There was no impatience in this cycle, no boredom, only steadiness. He understood now why the strongest men rarely announce themselves, why mastery often looks ordinary from the outside, why silence carries more authority than explanation. Discipline had become invisible and therefore unbreakable. As he walked forward, the world did not bend to him. It did not need to. He had stopped demanding that it do so. The path stretched ahead, undefined and open. And for the first time, that openness did not feel threatening. It felt honest. The warrior continued, not because he expected something at the end, but because walking the path was now the truest expression of who he was. That was the final transformation. Not arrival, not victory, but unshakable continuity. Unshakable discipline is not sustained by motivation or results. It is forged through presence, silence, and loyalty to the path when fear and ego demand escape.